I guess I like prison or something because I had just done something stupid, and now I was going back. It was November 22nd, 1998, and I had just returned from a deer hunt. A bad, unsuccessful deer hunt, as I might admit, because the deer were alert for idiots who were sneaking through the woods making noise that the deer could hear 2 miles away and whose mantra was, "Ready! Fire! Aim!" I returned a day earlier than I expected. I couldn't pull into my own driveway because it was blocked by some idiot's car, and I had to go 2 doors down to get a parking space at the curb. I was just getting out of the car, holding my Model 70 Winchester, something I would never leave in my car in the neighborhood, when I looked back at Moo's house and noticed them. My wife and some asshole were out on the porch, and she was kissing him, apparently goodbye. Almost without thinking, I raised my gun and fired. I didn't aim quite right, certainly not as well as I usually do when hunting. Instead of the torso, he was standing with his back to me, I hit him just above the back of his right knee. The 30.06 soft-tipped cartridge blew his leg apart, went through him, and hit my wife's left leg mid-thigh. Within seconds, I was on the ground, having been hit in the back of the head. I should have known that the guy 2 doors down from me was a cop with his military haircut. My hands were put behind my back and handcuffs were snapped on them. He was off duty but reacted instantly when he heard gunfire outside his house. I was outraged but quickly found myself helpless, and within minutes ambulances and police cars with sirens and flashers rolled up to the house. Neighbors were screaming, and one woman, a nurse I think, was trying to keep my wife and the asshole stable until the medics arrived. My name is Bill McCollum, and I worked at a welding shop in Allentown. I could glue 2 pieces of metal together, but I wasn't a real welder. I did a lot of rough work in the store and drove a truck. The pay wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible, not for someone with my 2 meager skills. Of course I was guilty, obviously guilty, and my public defender made that clear to me. But I was also stupid and insisted that I wasn't going to plead guilty for doing what any married man would do when he saw another man kissing his wife. It was my fucking right to defend my honor, even if it turned out that my wife's honor wasn't worth an empty can of beer. I was a first offender, which should have helped, but I don't think it really did. I ripped that jerk's leg off, blew it to splinters, and although my wife's leg survived, she'll have a nasty limp for the rest of her miserable life. In addition, she had an ugly scar on the left side of her face, where she had hit 2 concrete steps, falling down the small hill on which our house stood. I saw Linda, my fucking whore wife, in court, you might say, every day, but the trial only lasted 1, and that asshole of a prosecutor wanted the jury to see what I'd done to 2 innocent people. Maybe that innocence was supposed to sway the judge and jury to be lenient, but when I screamed that it was my fucking right to defend my honor and my lousy lawyer tried to gag me, it all went down the drain. 10 years, 10 stinking years. That was my sentence, and I was assigned to SCI Rockview, just a few miles north of the University of Pennsylvania. The fact that both Penn State University and State Penn were in the same county was boring humor. Rockview was a medium security prison, but I didn't get to stay there. Medium security or not, it was just like any other prison where the inmates were divided into whites, Hispanics, and blacks. I had blonde hair and blue eyes, and if I wasn't the whitest white guy around, I was close to it. I hadn't been in Rockview very long when Hector, the Latin King's thug, decided he wanted a white girl. I was new, trying to stay out of trouble, but trouble found me, and without the white gang, the prison's Aryan Brotherhood, to protect me, I was grabbed, pinned down, and raped by 3 smelly Mexicans. Medium security meant that only medium measures were deemed necessary to keep us from escaping. It didn't mean shit that prisoners had to protect themselves from each other. Hector and the Latin Kings were never punished, though it was obvious from my injuries what had happened to me. The thing is, it was immediately explained to me what happens to snitches in prison. If I ratted out Hector and his gang, a medium defense would mean my 10 fucking years would become a life sentence, and not a long one at that. Luckily, my cellmate was also white, and he taught me what I needed to know. Work out with weights, get stronger, and he'd get me into the brotherhood. I never had anything against blacks or Hispanics, but it was a matter of survival. I earned a transfer to SCI Graterford, a maximum security prison, when, after gaining mass, I caught Hector without his entourage and literally ripped his dignity off. It didn't add to my sentence, because Hector didn't snitch either. Of course, now that he was a girl, he'd lost all status with the Kings. Graterford was fucking brutal, but since I was already a member of the Brotherhood, I had as much protection as a man in this fucking system could ever hope for. And while I didn't get more time, there was no chance of parole. Hell, the judge didn't even count my time in pre-trial detention, so I wasn't going to be released until April 2009. All I could do was continue to bench press and support my fellow Brotherhood members. In January 2009, Correctional Services sent me to a rehabilitation center in Allentown. I had a parole officer, and he did me one, and only one, good deed. He reinstated my commercial driver's license so I could get a job. My license was only a Class B, meaning I could drive a straight truck, but not a tractor-trailer. I went around to all the ready-mix companies, material haulers, even the old welding shop where I used to work, but it was 2009. The fucking economy had tanked, and no place where drivers had ever worked with money was going to hire me. There were too many B-class guys out there looking for work who didn't have a criminal record. Eventually, my boss found me a job with a company with the very appropriate name of Brown Services. Really, Brown Services, owned by a guy named Jim Brown. Why was it appropriate? Because Brown Services dealt in septic tanks and building pumps. For some unfathomable reason, even during the Great Recession, septic tank pumping companies had a hard time keeping drivers. But heck, septic tanks were a gravy job at Brown. The really crappy jobs were pumping and cleaning toilets at construction sites, and as a junior, that was the job I got. It was August and hot as hell when I was sent to a construction site north of Bethlehem. It was a self-service gas station built in the middle of a working-class residential neighborhood, and after doing my stinky job, I headed for the exit and saw my whore ex-wife getting out of her car, the same one she had 11 years ago, in front of a mid-1970s brick rancher. I never knew where she lived before and had no interest in it after I got divorce papers while in jail. No alimony because we had no kids, and no child support since she was making about as much as I was before this shit happened. She still limped, since her left leg was now shorter than her right, and even the augmented left shoe wasn't helping. I smiled, realizing the bitch deserved it. I hadn't seen the asshole, but he'd probably dumped her whore ass after losing 30 pounds of leg. He deserved it too. I wanted even more revenge because what I'd already done certainly didn't deserve 10 fucking years in jail. Hell, I should have gotten a medal for that, for standing up for what was right. But I couldn't figure out what I could do to her, or to that asshole, that wouldn't land me back in jail. I had 2 weeks to think about it, but nothing came to mind. Then I got my assignment for the day. Go back to that self-service gas station. It was the middle of my route, so my tank was already half full and it was about 90 outside. Maybe I wouldn't have done it. Maybe I would have decided I shouldn't, because it would lead me back to Graterford if I hadn't been half stoned that day. Really, if you don't smoke pot, you just can't last all day cleaning out portable vapors. But I couldn't help but think about it while I was cleaning that particularly nasty toilet, and you know how it is. Thought turns to action. I pulled up in front of Linda's house, put it in reverse, pulled up to the big living room window, broke it, stuck my big hose in, and unloaded my entire pile of shit right into her fucking house. I laughed as I drove away, knowing I had destroyed her house and all her shit inside as surely as if it was a meth lab. Now they'd have to tear the fucking place down, or better yet, let the fire department use it for training. Of course, it didn't work out the way I'd hoped, and I realized that when I came downstairs after getting high. The cops were at my door by 7 p.m. because it was obvious who had done that shit to Linda's house. Yeah, I was going back to Graterford, but for some fucking reason I didn't care. Maybe because I was burning another cigarette when the cops showed up. Turns out Linda was renting the house, not owning it, and she had a bastard child, so he was homeless, and so was she. And her boyfriend, Captain Hook? He's long gone, and he's not even the father of her kid.